Hello, everybody. Hey, how are you? I'm Steve Harper from yourcreativelife.com and really excited to be with you today. I'm a writer, an actor, a producer, and a certified creativity coach, and I do these free 30-minute calls every couple of weeks, and I call them the Creative Expression Session. So welcome to the latest Creative Expression Session. And today we are going to talk about feedback. Feedback is one of those universal, wonderful, challenging, interesting, strange, difficult things that is part of what we do as writers. We look for feedback, we reach out for feedback, we try to get feedback, and that's one of the things that we're always doing or involved in or engaged in. And that's why I want to talk about it, because look, think about it. You're engaged in a script. You've written something. You've done something that you feel super connected to. Perhaps you've spent months or weeks or days or even years on a particular piece of writing, and you are ready to get some thoughts and feedback on that piece. You brave all of the challenges. You push through all the roadblocks, your personal roadblocks, your emotional, psychological things that have happened with you in your life, and you are ready now to present your work to the world. So what do you do? For your TV script, for your play, for your screenplay, what do you do when it's time to reach out and to get some feedback? Now, you recognize after spending all this time on your work that your work is your baby. Your work is like your child. And you love it to death, and you certainly want to find out what other people think, but either to strengthen the piece or to move it along. And at the same time, it's kind of a scary proposition, or it can be. So 2 questions for you, 2 major questions. 1, what do you do to get feedback? And 2, what do you do to get good feedback? What do you do to get feedback, and what do you do to get good feedback? So that's what we're talking about today on the Creative Expression Session. And look, even if you go to some industry person, some friend of yours, or somebody who's connected to the industry, who is out there and is a really good, reliable source, and perhaps has been giving notes to people for years, or even if you go out and find that person, whether it's a friend or some other professional, and you pay them for comments, you may not get good feedback. That's the bottom line. It may not happen. And since it's an essential part of the writing process, knowing what to look for and how to get it is key, I think. And that's what we're talking about today. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to define what good feedback is. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why so few people are able to give good feedback. And then we're going to talk about the components of how feedback works so that you can recognize that for yourself. And finally, we're going to talk about what to do after you get feedback to stay balanced and focused. All right, so those few things. We're going to talk about what good feedback is, why so few people are able to give it, the components of good feedback so you can recognize what that is and either get it or give it yourself. And we're going to talk about what you do after you get feedback to stay focused and grounded. All right, all in 30 minutes or less. And we're going to answer your questions too at the same time, or not at the same time, but at the end. So first, let's jump right in. What's good feedback? So I think I define good feedback as feedback that enables you to tell the story you want to tell in the way that you think is best for the story that you want to tell. Right? Telling your story in a way that's clean and clear and focused, feedback that allows you to do that, comments that allow you to do that, that's good feedback. And the emphasis is on you and your opinion because it's your baby. You're the parent of this child that is your script. So that's how I define good feedback. And if we go a little further with the baby analogy, it's like you're a parent at a parent-teacher conference. Right? The faculty may have all kinds of ideas about your child, but you're the parent. And ultimately, you get to raise her as you see fit, right? Even if the other people have ideas or very strident ideas or very special, particular, specific ideas, you get to decide. because you're the parent, right? So I say all that to say that it's really important that, that you hold on to your authority in the wake of comments. And we're going to talk about that coming up. But certainly, you never have to take all the notes, no matter what happens, no matter what notes you get. You never have to take them all, unless perhaps you're working for somebody else and writing something for somebody else. But in the world of creating your own material, you always get to choose. Always, capital A. So good feedback should liberate you to find something in line with your vision that might translate the story more completely to somebody who isn't you. It starts and ends with your vision. So I hope that's clear. It's like it's all about you, and the feedback is really supposed to help you express your vision and nothing more than that. So let's talk about why so few people are able to give good feedback, right? It's a really interesting question. Well, look, we live, for better or for worse, and I think unfortunately, in an age of snark and trash talk, right? Think about it. People regularly talk about TV, movies, plays, celebrities, and pop culture with this same overriding derision, right? People are full of hyperbole. Hyperbole is everywhere. And people will say things are either terrible or they're great, you know, and all of this stuff that is really not necessarily useful. We even say things like, oh, that artist, that director, that person should be shot, right? We come up with all of this ridiculous venom and hyper praise for things all across the spectrum of TV and film. So all around us, every day, people launch into this kind of either vitriol or vicious dissection of creative projects, or super hyper praise, the absolute best, perfection, all of that stuff that I think ultimately is not really useful. So consequently, I think when people turn to give feedback to a real writer, a real live flesh and blood human being, the parent of a fantastic new piece of writing, or of a new piece of writing, let's take the praise out of it. When people turn to a real live parent of a piece of writing, they often bring that same snarky, vicious energy to the feedback session, which I think is completely not useful and perhaps even damaging. So we bring our sense of that cultural trash talk into the feedback sessions that we want to do that happen with regular and real people. Now, why is that so damaging? First, I think it's damaging because cultural trash talk leaves out what's good about a piece and jumps directly to the less desirable parts, right? So think about it. If somebody's like, that show sucks, right? They're really leaving out any positive thing they might begin to say, and they love and gravitate toward that snarky bit, right? So that's the first thing. It leaves out anything positive and jumps to this hyperbolic negative space. Second, cultural trash talk assumes that the speaker, the trash talker, is right? Right with a capital R. The comments are spoken with the same authority that journalists use or bloggers use. You know, expertise is the name of the game among people who trash talk. And there's a huge assumption about the rightness of that person's opinion, right? This is law. It's terrible. I'm telling you, it's terrible, right? How often do we come forward with that kind of venom and that kind of self-righteousness in approaching work that isn't ours, work that is on TV? So that's not useful. The third reason why I think it's so damaging is cultural trash talk, which veers into suggestions sometimes about what your script should be. Those may have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with what you're trying to do as a writer. It may have nothing to do with what you're trying to do as a writer. So for example, imagine somebody saying, well, your material is really terrible. It really sucks. But if it took place in outer space, oh, it would be so much better. Okay, well, that's a useless comment unless you intend to make it an outer space drama. It's useless because that's not about your vision of the piece. That's about somebody else rewriting your vision of the piece, which I think ostensibly you probably didn't ask them to do. So now, no wonder with all of this talk, all of this cultural trash talk and these pitfalls and all of that, No wonder so many writers feel really beaten up and shamed and humiliated after getting really harsh notes. No wonder. It's not fun to feel like your work has no merit. It's not fun to feel like, it's a pile of mistakes rather than anything else, and a pile of missed opportunities rather than anything else. That is no fun. Why would any writer want to subject him or herself to that kind of ridicule? And why would any writer get back on the horse after such a bludgeoning experience? Difficult, right? So what do we do? What is the alternative? That's the big question, and that's what we're here to talk about. What is the alternative? So here's an example of a group that I think does feedback incredibly well, and I'm going to talk about them and how they do it. So New York Theater Workshop, which of course is in New York and is a theater organization that produces plays and puts on plays, they do this reading series every week. It used to be on Monday nights, but it may not be. I'm not sure. It might still be. I'm not sure since I'm in Los Angeles. But they read a play, and then they do a feedback loop with the audience. Now, this particular feedback loop that they do, which I think is so cool, is they solicit comments based on something called the critical response technique. And the critical response technique was created by a dancer choreographer named Liz Lerman. So Liz Lerman's critical response technique, and you can definitely Google that and look it up and read about her and what it is. And I'm going to tell you what it is and how they use it. They go through these steps. There are 5 steps, right? And they use those steps in this way. They ask an audience these questions. First, they say, what did you like about the piece? That's the first step. What did you like? And they go around the circle and exhaust what people liked. They only say what people liked about the piece until those comments are done, right? So that's the first step. What did you like? And then you go through everything that everybody liked until you're done with that. The second thing is, what confused you? That's the second question. And they go around the circle and only say what confused them until they exhaust the comments of what confused somebody about the piece. Then the third step in this technique is, what neutral questions do you have? And by neutral questions, what they mean are questions sort of without any kind of vicious opinion. So in other words, the difference between, why was there a Christmas tree in the show, as opposed to, what's with that stupid tree? All right, you get the flavor of the difference between a neutral question. Why was there a tree? And that tree was so stupid. Why was it there? Right? So that's the third step, neutral questions. Then fourth, the playwright also gets to ask questions of the audience to come forth and say, hey, what about this? I'm curious about how this landed on you, or whatever the playwright or writer wants to ask. And finally, the fifth step, we get in the last round, the audience is invited to express their opinions. But the technique, in this particular case, they invite an opinion in this very specific way. They invite the person in the audience who has an opinion to say, I have an opinion about blank. Do you want to hear it? Right? So I have an opinion about the Christmas tree. Do you want to hear it? So first of all, that's amazing, because nobody ever, it forces the audience to frame their opinion and to recognize that it's an opinion and to offer it to the writer. And then the writer then can say yes or no. Nope, I don't want to hear your opinion about it. Or yes, sure. And if yes, and only if yes, the opinion will be thrown out there to express to the writer. And again, one of the great things about it is that the writer never has to respond even to the opinion, or even write it down or whatever. So the opinion is offered. If it's accepted, the writer will listen to it, and that's it. So those 5 steps: what did you like? What confused you? Neutral questions. The writer asks questions, and opinions framed with, I have an opinion about blank. Do you want to hear it? Yes or no? So to me, this is revolutionary in a number of ways, right? Mainly because the opinion comes last. And in most cases, in so much feedback, the opinion comes first, right? So just think about it. Sometimes when using this format, the writer will, and I certainly have as a writer and seen other writers too, have enough information for whatever they need to do in terms of a rewrite after they get hearing what people liked and hearing what confused them. Like that may be all you need. Oh, I get it. This isn't clear. And you really like this. Let me go back and do some rewriting work. It may not be necessary in those instances to get people's opinions at all. So I think that's really instructive. Now, the point here is that there's really good information to be gleaned in feedback before someone starts throwing in their opinions around like those opinions are facts. So I can say, for example, to somebody, I love the premise, I love the character, I love the situation. Then I can say, you know, the earthquake confused me. And I can ask a question like, why did they get back together at the end? And that may be enough to clue a writer in to going into the next draft and figure out for themselves what's working in their story and what isn't. I hope that makes sense to you. Again, what I love about this process is that it puts the focus on the writer and what she wants for her piece, rather than shifting the power to the person who's commenting or who is asked to hold their critical opinion unless it's asked for. Right? The power dynamic is really super important to me, and I imagine to many writers, and I imagine to you as well. So that's the way New York Theater Workshop does it with Liz Lerman's critical response technique. But the question, the relevant and certainly important question is how to implement this in the real world, right? Because you can't necessarily go around and, you know, tell your agent or manager or somebody on a TV writing staff, you know what, I only want to hear what you liked, or neutral questions, please. You can't really do that. I totally get it. So how do you implement it in the real world? So, you know, there's probably no way to get, to have this happen around an executive, a TV executive, or a professional reader. There may be no way to do that. So I concede that. But I think the notion of having it in your mind is actually really useful, because I think you can and should 99.9% of the time, whenever it's possible, ask for what you want in terms of feedback. Now, this is a step that people leave out all the time. We assume that we just need to say, oh, can you tell me what you think? And then like hide. Tell me what you think, and I hope it's not too bad, right? Rather than asking in a proactive way to bring that leadership into your writing life, proactively say, here's what I'm looking for. Right? How often do you do that? And how often do we hear writers do that? Almost never, I think. So for example, a great sentence along those lines is, I want to hear about whether the story plays well with you and what you think of the characters, right? So that's a really specific suggestion. I want to hear about the story, how it works, how it plays well for you. And I want to hear about the characters. Very specific. Or you could say something like, you know, I'd like to hear what you like about the piece first, and then tell me if anything confused you. How great and specific. So if a friend of yours is reading, if a reader who is professional but is connected to you as a friend is reading, if you send your script out to somebody by email and you don't get a chance to talk to them, to outline as you send the script, or, you know, and to reiterate when you talk to them, okay, here's really what I want to know. I want to know about this, and I want to know about that. It's a great way to protect yourself to what may be unwanted and unsolicited feedback. Now, it's entirely possible, I think, to ask those kinds of questions and to set those boundaries in that kind of way. And hopefully you'll get what you asked for. That obviously doesn't always happen. But in my experience, if I don't ask for anything specific, if I just say, hey, tell me what you think, I'll get a ton of comments which may or may not be useful or even relevant to what I'm up to, right? So if I don't ask, if I don't attempt to set some parameters and boundaries around the feedback experience, I may or may not get anything that's relevant or anything that's useful in terms of my script. So the bottom line is, again, it's your script. And you should have feedback that helps you get what you want out of the script, that allows the script to be what you want the script to be. So inviting people to comment in that way, really specifically and focusedly in terms of what it is you want to hear about, only makes sense, you know? And I think, again, to go with my analogy from before, not too dissimilar from going to a parent-teacher conference with your child and saying to the teachers, we really want to know specifically about behavior in the classroom and improvement in grades. Like there's nobody would balk at that. You know, they might have some more stuff to say, and they might say, hey, well, I have a couple of other thoughts. Do you want to hear those too? And then you get to decide yes or no. But the reason and the way of taking the leadership in that space, I think, is really key. And I think a lot of writers don't even think to do that. So we've covered what good feedback is, at least what I think good feedback is, why people often don't give good feedback, all of that cultural snarkiness that people seem to love and enjoy like it's a sport. And we've talked about a method of giving feedback. And remember that this methodology of giving feedback when it's your time to give notes. I mean, how great would it be if somebody just comes to you and says, hey, just tell me what you think, and you automatically lean into some framework that says, I'm going to tell you what I really, really, really loved. I'm going to tell you what confused me. Here are my questions, and I have a few opinions. Do you want them? And they could say yes, and then you could express those, right? How great would that be as a gift to another writer for you to turn the paradigm on its head and lean into what you know good feedback to be. So here's the last piece that we're going to talk about today before I open it up to your questions, and that is, how do you survive feedback? How do you survive feedback? Because there's some really vicious feedback out there, which I'm sure you know. Well, first, I think the main thing is to give yourself time, energy, space, to sort out what you like, what comments you like, and what comments you're not so keen on. Now, this is really important, I think. So many of us, I believe, think that when we get comments, we need to take them. These people spent time. They really think this. I better take that note. I disagree. It's really important to take the time and create the space to decide, which comments do I like? Which comments don't I like? Okay, I get to decide, I get to choose, right? Second, to breathe into forgiveness if any hurt comes up. So this is really key to me. And yes, perhaps a little bit spiritual, but I think in some ways, I've certainly gotten feedback from people where I thought, wow, I'm feeling really wounded by that guy. You know, what do I do about that? So I think there's a sense of breathing in forgiveness toward that guy. I know that was a little dicey. I don't know. I don't believe he meant that in that way. I'm going to forgive him. And also to breathe in forgiveness of myself. Okay, I really wanted to have a perfect script. I really wanted somebody to just say, you know, you're amazing. And that didn't happen, so I'm not perfect. I don't have a perfect script. So let me breathe in forgiveness about myself and for myself and my script, that I am flawed and the script is flawed. Let me just breathe that in, right? So that's the second piece, to breathe in forgiveness if any hurt comes up. Then to carefully decide which things you're going to use in your rewrite and which things you don't want to use, and begin to make a plan. Okay, I like these 3 suggestions. I don't like these 3, so I'm going to push those aside. These 3 that I like, how am I going to implement? What might I try, or what might I think about? And then make a little list, a little action list, and then start rewriting, right? So how do you survive feedback that's challenging, or even that's not challenging? Give yourself time to sort out what you like and what you don't. Breathe into forgiveness if you need to breathe into forgiveness, and carefully decide which things you want to use and create a game plan around how you want to use them. And then, and as a rule, I do say as a rule, you probably don't want to take every note. You probably never want to take every note that you get. So just as a rule. Now, maybe you will, but I think it's really great to default on the side of like, not everything. Don't need to buy everything in the shopping cart. You can put some things back. And then to start rewriting, right? So those are the key things. So I personally always give feedback in the spirit of these ideas. In the script consults I do through my company, Your Creative Life, in casual conversations that I have with people about their work. I try to do it in casual conversations I have about other people's work, about television shows that I like or watch or don't like and watch. And certainly in all kinds of casual conversations about writing, I am always leaning into this possibility to be gentle and to be guided toward what the writer is looking to discover about his or her work. I believe really firmly and fundamentally, it's not my job or my business to tell them how to rewrite their work, right? I might say, you know, I was confused by this and I have a suggestion if you're open to that, right? But I don't want to be the guy who goes, look, your script would be so much better if there were dinosaurs. So cut all the people and make it dinosaurs, please. You know, because it's not useful to, or perhaps it's not useful to the script that person wants to write. So I think it's really essential to always use that kind of gentle, personal, writer-centered feedback. Cool. So now it's time to open to your questions if you have any. It's looking like the Q&A feature here is not really working. So that doesn't look like it's possible. But if you can always email me questions at coachsteve@yourcreativelife.com. I love to answer questions about this and anything in the writing life and anything in, you know, script consulting or coaching or any questions that you have. But I also always create a few questions just in case the question feature is disabled or in case people don't have questions. So I will answer those. So the first one goes like, the first one I thought you might want to know goes like this. As far as feedback goes, shouldn't you just take it? As far as feedback goes, should you just take it? And I say no, I don't think you should. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion on the whole planet. And I think you'll find more and more as you do more work and you put more work out there, there's the opportunity to get a million opinions, especially if you write or have written or will write for a television show. You'll find on Facebook and Twitter and neighbors and people on the street, everyone has an opinion. So not all feedback is useful by definition because not everybody's feedback is going to be really helpful to you. So I don't think you should just take it. You know, just like in parenting, you get to decide how to treat your child, and I think it's the same thing. Only you can decide what's useful in the scope of your creation, and you should take responsibility for that and definitely recognize that you shouldn't just take it and all feedback is not useful. Now, that's not to say that you should be rude about it, because I don't believe in being rude, but you should know that you don't need to accept whatever is offered just because it's offered. If it's not a good fit, send it back. Here's another question I thought you might have, and that goes like this. My friend told me not to ask for feedback if I'm not going to take the suggestions. What do you think of that? So I think that kind of comment is really short-sighted and largely about the person who's giving feedback, and I think kind of disrespectful to the person who's getting feedback. I don't know, if I'm getting feedback from somebody, I don't know what the feedback is going to be before I get it. So to promise I'm going to take their feedback just because they gave me the time to do it, I don't even see how that makes sense. It's kind of absurd. You're the filter as the writer, as I'm the filter as me being a writer. And if I'm writing for myself and not hired for a job or writing for somebody else, if I'm writing for myself, I'm the only filter, right? So I think it's really important to stay true to what you want to do and only do the feedback that helps you get there, no matter what the feedback person thinks is sort of offensive if you don't take all their comments. I think that's ridiculous. Last question that I have that I thought you might have is, if I'm giving feedback to somebody, how do I know what it is they're trying to do in their script? Well, that's a really good question. And I say the really simple answer is ask them. They'll be happy to answer, and they'll be happy that you asked. And you'll have a new sense of what you might say to somebody in order to achieve them, or to help them achieve that in the piece that they're writing. So again, if you have no idea, just say, hey, I'm really curious what it is you're trying to accomplish here in this script. Or I'm really curious what kind of feedback would be really helpful to you. Like, what a great and gentle and generous way to approach feedback, rather than just say, okay, tell you what I think. You know, it's just not the way to go. So ask people, communicate with people, show up in a way that is gentle and loving, and invite that when you get feedback from other people. And know that you don't need a ton of opinions in order to get a sense of how your work and script and writing is playing on the page. So if you have any other questions about feedback, and I hope that was useful to you, feel free to both watch this video over again. It's going to be on the YouTube page. You may be watching it there now. You can see it as many times as you want. Also tell your friends, because there are a ton of really helpful, useful, and interesting videos about writing and the writing life. I do this every week. I do 1-minute pieces. I do 30-minute pieces. I coach, I teach, I script consult. And there's a lot of, I really love the opportunity to help writers express themselves with their vision and put their vision out in the world in a way that I really honestly believe changes the fabric of the world. That's what I'm all about. That's what I wish for you. I'm really glad you joined us. Feel free to email me at coachsteve@yourcreativelife.com with any questions, comments, or thoughts. Check out the website at yourcreativelife.com and check us out on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Where this video lives. And look, happy writing, happy creating, and I wish you the absolute best in terms of you creating new work that enhances the planet in the way that you are looking to create that work. So thanks for joining me. Have a great rest of your day, and happy writing.